From the capital city of the United States of America, Washington, D.C., ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
I'm there to destroy my opponent strictly.
I want to address a couple of points that he made.
At some point, Democrats were going to have to go back to Texas, so I don't think this is something that they would have been able to do indefinitely.
And they did, Malik, did plan to be there indefinitely. In fact, that was one of the quotes. We plan to stay indefinitely until this session is over, until we get voting rights back. The bottom line is, these three Democrats, they folded, they caved, they sold out faster than Jordans on Christmas Day. They have completely betrayed their caucus and their colleagues.
Obviously, we know when it comes to political maneuvers like this, Republicans have done the same thing, and even Democrats now are doing that. But I think we should actually probably have a larger conversation about this whole idea of voter suppression. There were things actually in the bill that I think sometimes people are some people are purposely ignoring things that are in the bill, and then there are other people who simply just don't know what's in the bill. But there are things that are in the bill that aren't actually voter suppression. So whether that is, and I can't think of the young lady, unfortunately, I just had a brain freeze and I forgot her name, but there were things in the bill like increasing that, the early voting hours, that Sunday souls to the poll thing. But what Republicans did, actually, they increased the number of hours for that.
Number one, when he talked about extending the voting hours, they did extend the voting hours, but they only extended the early voting hours during a certain specific time. So they knew good and well what they were doing when they said, we'll extend it by 1 hour, but only if you go between this time and that time, which technically just pretty much makes the extending of the voting hours null and void.
And there was other things that they actually did in the bill that wasn't actually voter suppression. For instance, the 24-hour voting and the drive-through voting, these are things that, particularly in Harris County, were implemented in response to the pandemic. That people who weren't out, because of the lack of in-person voting options, they implemented these things in response to that. The Texas legislature they eliminated those things. So they eliminated 24-hour voting that were, again, implemented in response to the pandemic. Okay. So really just eliminating things that were implemented in response to the pandemic.
Yeah, this is where my friend Malik and his GOP colleagues are confused, because guess what, Malik? We're still in a pandemic. And we will continue to be in a pandemic because the GOP refuses to implement policies, administrative procedures to actually get folks vaccinated and to prevent the Delta virus. And Texas leads in that. In fact, Texas was one of the first states that actually returned to normal when it was not suggested. So secondly, when we talk about voter restriction, let's talk about it. When we talk about the 24-hour access, yes, it was for the pandemic, but there also was a huge increase in Harris County that went blue under the leadership of Mayor Sylvester Turner, who, by the way, is one of the only mayors in this country, one of the very few that actually did implement policies after the George Floyd justice and the George Floyd matter. I just want to kind of put that out there. When you talk about drive-through voting, that was also something that increased turnout among people of color. When we talk about the ability to intimidate folks by allowing partisan poll watchers, this is something as well that was a part of this new bill that was now passed. And they added criminal penalties for elected officials to send out just asking people to request their ballot. So there are several things in this bill that contributes to voter suppression.
24-hour voting, that was only in Harris County, and it was only at certain precincts. That isn't something that was statewide. Even the drive-through voting, I think that was actually on one day. It wasn't something that was just a part of the entire early voting system. It literally was on one day, and again, in Harris County, not the entire state.
Yeah, Harris County, just in case you're not familiar, Houston is Harris County. That's the fourth largest city in the country, one of the largest cities that have voters of color. And if it is just one day and just one drive-through, then why not leave it? Why take the time to craft legislation to carve out, let's just be clear, black folks in just that one county? So it's certainly not just one county. And let's also talk about the fact that they are including surveillance cameras, the fact that they are including restriction from those that need assistance. Oh, there's quite a bit of voter suppression, and I noticed you didn't respond to all of the other things that I gave you on your talking points as well.
The only thing that they're doing, they're just refusing to show up for their own job. So I won't say that Democrats are actually winning, but
their job, Malik, is to represent their constituents, and their constituents want access to the polls.
I actually have family members who are watching in Harris County right now. Why? Because I'm from Mississippi and I vacation in summers in Houston, so I know Houston very well, just if there's any confusion about my knowledge of Harris County.
To help make sure you're not confused, I actually have a house in Harris County. I was just there in Houston on yesterday. I work for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, so I too am familiar with Harris County and voted in Harris County through the drive-through voting, just in case there's any confusion about that.
Well, I got 3 houses in Harris County and a Scarface album, so can't none of y'all tell me about Texas.
To the winner by majority decision.